Welcome, fellow storm riders. You are officially a rider on the Hypnotic Storm. This is Chris Thompson, and welcome to session number 40 of Brain Software with Dr. Mike Mandel, otherwise known as The Chris and Jeff Show.
That's our new name, The Chris and Jeff Show.
He's obsessed with the music of Palestrina, makes a scalding hot Thai red curry, and owns picks used by 3 of rock's greatest guitar heroes.
Yes, I do.
He is the center of the Hypnotic World Epicenter, the rider on the Hypnotic Storm. He is none other than the Wizard of the Hypnotic Storm, Dr. Mike Mandel.
Come to Earth in human form, sounding 30 or 40 years younger than the 60 years he really is. Actually, no, I sound old today, Chris. My voice is shot. We've just done a live webinar and are now doing our podcast. I've been fighting a bit of a cold, a bit of a sore throat, but I'm still here for you. I'm not dead yet, folks. Not dead yet.
Spreading your flu viruses to me.
Hey, I want to explain why we call it the Chris and Jeff Show. Now, the reason why is just stupidly, I started calling Chris Christabel for a while. I couldn't decide whether it's about Christabel or Christobel. Your thoughts on this are appreciated, listeners. But I've stopped calling him that on the program, so I won't mention it. But I did want to say that I started sending him emails, and I started spelling it Chris, C-H-R-I-S-S, putting an extra and a one.
That's how you started
So
it.
did 2 S's. Then I did K-R-I-S-S, and a couple of emails later, then K-R-Y-S-S-E, and just making it stranger and stranger.
C-H-R-Y-S-S-E-E.
So Chris sends me an email, and just calls me Jeff, J-E-F-F, which I thought was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, going from no intermediate steps, just right from Dr. Mike to Jeff.
Yeah. I just thought it would be a great interrupt.
I loved it.
You were just smoothly transitioning my name from
And
the
you just
normal
jumped
spelling
right
to
in.
just...
Right to the nuclear weapons. Anyway, welcome everybody. We got a great show for you today. We got a bunch of material to cover as usual, and we're hoping my voice holds out.
Yes, it will. Let's dive into the hypnosis stuff, and right before we do, we want to make sure everyone out there knows we had an awesome handwriting analysis, graphoanalysis course in Toronto, about a month ago now, actually.
Yes, it was actually a graphology course. Graphoanalysis, a trademark term.
Graphoanalysis.
But yes, it was a good graphology course. We got some great feedback of people saying they're using this in their practice already. Dee Dee said she was skeptical, but she took the course just because I was teaching it. She said she's blown away with it all.
It's crazy.
Everybody's having a great result with it. So we will do that again. It will be a 2-day course. Somebody came in from Philadelphia for it. But we have upcoming the next Architecture of Hypnosis course in Toronto at the end of November. Chris, you got the dates there.
Yes, so we want to make sure that you're all aware the next Architecture of Hypnosis, it's a 5-day course, but it's being split over 2 weekends. So it's a Saturday-Sunday followed by a Friday-Saturday-Sunday.
So even if you're coming from out of town, you just have 4 days off in between. You come up for a whole week to Toronto, hang around. We got world-class opera and museums and art galleries and all kinds of cool stuff to do.
It actually does make the course easier to digest because you're drinking from a fire hose the entire time that you're in this class. Mike is teaching you so much material, so it actually is appreciated by a lot of the people to have the Monday through Thursday off. That said, the dates are October, I believe, if I'm getting my dates right here. It's November 23rd and I'm going to check the calendar here just as I'm saying this. November 23 and 24, followed by November 29 and 30, and then December 1.
And it's going to be here before you know it. We are getting people booking already, confirming and putting in the deposits already. Go to the website and check it out. We've got a student from Texas coming, and typically these are extremely well attended, and you will have the time of your life. Come and study with the Hypnotic Storm Riders. Chris and Jeff in Toronto,
Chris
Canada.
and Jeff. I just also want to point out, a lot of people have emailed saying, well, how big is the class? I think there's a lot of people who envision that we're going to have thousands of people packed into a room. That is not the way we run these classes. We're talking a couple of dozen students here.
Yeah, we do not meet in a hotel ballroom. We're in an actual classroom at the University of Toronto, and you'll have a blast with
Everybody who takes the class gets to build really good relationships with all the other students and with us, and it's just a phenomenal experience. You get to personally talk with everybody. I mean, you're not just, going to see Mike at a distance and wonder if you'll ever be able to have a conversation with him. You will be in the classroom conversing with everybody over and over for the entire 5 days, and you will really love it. It's just a tremendous experience. Can't say enough about it. So if you're worried about there being too many people in the room, absolutely not the case. We keep these classes small. Let's get on to the topic at hand here today, Mike. Hypnosis and all kinds of wacky stuff.
What do we got to start with?
Let's start with... we had a question about getting people to threshold. So this question came from Victoria in Sydney, and she wrote in and said, This is related to weight management. In your experience, Mike, what are the most effective ways, or perhaps your favorite ways, to get someone solidly to threshold? So talk about what that is when you're answering it. And if they're not quite at threshold, is there a best method to test if someone is solidly at threshold? I understand the wobble around threshold often points to the problem. For example, it's hard to stay at threshold if you believe, I have the fat gene and cannot get lean. This limiting belief will make it difficult to allow it's up to me to feel available to them, which is part of threshold Mike will get to. I'm going to stop there because I think it just goes on.
That's some good stuff. Threshold is the place you want to get your subject/client to, which is 3 components, really, the simplified version. Something has to change. It has to be now, and it has to be me.
Which is exactly what Victoria was hinting at. How is it that you get the person to believe that it has to be me if, for example, they're convinced they have the fat gene? So I'm assuming she's bringing this up because she probably has had clients, given that she specializes in weight management, who believe that they have the fat gene and they can't possibly get thin.
Although obesity is unknown during times of famine, it does not exist. It never exists in concentration camps.
So that would be an interesting metaphor reframe.
Right. It certainly shows that it is not a gene.
So a challenge to Victoria would be to go out, research this topic about obesity being non-existent during famine, and use that with subjects as
It doesn't exist. I had one client once who told me he was in for a phobia cure, and he said he wanted to work on his weight too, but realized he was grossly obese, and he said he wanted to work on his weight too, but realized it was impossible because his problem was his glands.
Oh.
And I said, you're right, because each one of them weighs about 15 pounds now. And he sort of laughed about it. And he said, well, I have an underactive this and underactive that. I said, no, you've got an overactive fork.
Yeah.
And it's true. Without sufficient caloric intake, you cannot weigh too much. But anyway, back to threshold. One of the simplest ways of getting someone to threshold, do not see any client unless they're willing to change. That's one of the things I do. I make it difficult to get to see me. I don't talk to just whoever wants to work on a problem or anyone who wants an appointment. I ensure that it's difficult. It's going to be inconvenient for them because it's inconvenient for me to fit everybody in. And I say, this is the only date I have open. If you can make it on that, yeah, I will. And you've got to convince me that you want to change. I put the onus on them. If you can't convince me you want to quit smoking, if you can't convince me you want to get over this anxiety and live a productive life, I'm not going to deal with it. No, I want to and their very act of convincing you will often fire their convincer strategy, and they will then be at threshold.
Okay, let me ask you a question to modify this slightly, because for someone like Victoria, who I believe in the email, she said she specifically works with people on weight management, so this is her full-time job. It's going to be difficult for her to tell someone, it's going to be tough for me to fit you into my schedule. You don't do full-time therapy anymore, Mike, right? So you do a lot of other stuff.
But you can be so busy helping people who really want to change.
Yeah. So what I'm also thinking is, can she do something on the intake form, for example, to have people go through some sort of ordeal or some sort of work, filling out some sort of answers to questions to convince you that they are serious about changing?
Well, of course. I mean, you just nailed it with that, Chris. How would you do that?
I was thinking about design. I would have to spend a bit more time thinking about it, but just off the top of my head here, I would put together an intake form that had questions on it like, how is it that convince me you're responsible for your own weight?
Yeah.
Something like that.
And make them realize they're at cause, not you. So you have to find out all the things that will happen when they change and ask them the consequences. What will happen if you do not change? How will you feel? Well, how will people look at you? You have to pile on all the positives and negatives. The positives of what will happen if you change and the negatives of what will happen if you do not change.
I would also probably want to...
Listen to my voice.
Yeah, it's horrible. I would want to preempt the I've tried everything excuse because people are going to say, I've tried everything. Well, of course, nobody has tried everything. That's impossible. And everything is an infinite list, right?
If someone said, I've tried everything, I'd say, so you're ready to lose the weight now.
Right. Yeah.
Implying you've stopped all the trying and now you're ready to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I would probably want to use on the intake form something to the effect of, what have you already done that hasn't worked in the past?
Yeah, it's always good to know that.
And that way you can lead that, and you can basically use this as a yes set and compliance set, right? When you're then talking to them after, what have you tried that hasn't worked? And so then you want to get them on the page where they agree that there are all kinds of things they haven't yet done, which are going to result in them managing their weight.
Right. She's really talking very nicely here about, Victoria's mentioning about people who sort of wobble around that point where they're almost at threshold. They're just not quite there. And one of the keys here is to really, really emphasize just those two things. What's going to happen if you don't do it today? Yeah. And what's going to happen if you do change everything today? How are you going to feel? How much better will you turn it back into a kinesthetic state and give them a nudge that way? And the way you can tell, let me close with this point, the way you can tell that they are at threshold is they'll be congruent.
Yeah.
Their body language, their words, their tonality will all be sending the identical message to you.
And you can use this, obviously, in everyday conversation. When people are complaining to you about their problems, you can ask them the same kinds of questions. Well, how will you know when you've overcome this problem? Right? You don't have to be a therapist to use this.
Sure. That's your evidence criteria. How will you know? What will you see, hear, and feel when you're over this?
As opposed to why questions, which keep you stuck.
Right. And remember, too, Victoria, one of the key questions is when you put them at cause, have them realize that the excess weight is not something that is happening to them. It is a behavior they are maintaining. So when you get them to recognize they're at cause, they're the locus of the change, the focus of the change, then you can say to them the magic question, what's next? And that is really powerful. What's next? Well, I'm going to change the way I eat. That's right. Well, let's do this hypnotically and help you crave good foods and, lose the desire for the bad stuff and so on and so on. I mean, you can make someone, if they don't want to eat chocolate again, Didi has made a whole career out of this. That's fantastic. Didi Regatos is the weight management guru here in Toronto, and she lost a ton of weight and looks absolutely fantastic and maintains that. And she says, if you want to quit eating chocolate or pizza or whatever, I can make you hate it, and she can. And there's ways of attaching so much disgust to a particular thing, you will not eat it anymore. But I think it's really good to combine that with the desire for healthy foods and how great they're going to feel. Let them get an inkling of feeling already amazing based on what that state's going to be like.
Want to just touch on the beautiful reframe that you gave earlier, which is to not have people look at weight as something that has happened past tense to them, but put it in the present tense.
It's a behavior they're maintaining.
Yeah, I love that. That's it's freaking awesome reframe. So putting it in present tense makes it not only here and now we can change it,
yes,
but
it's not out of reach.
It's not in the past and therefore unchangeable.
It's not carved in stone in the past, and it isn't a future certainty.
It is a process that they are maintaining
right now. And we're back, Chris, to the thing we said on the webinar. John Grinder says, how am I exquisitely maintaining this behavior? That's the question.
That's the
thing
I wrote down.
How am I exquisitely maintaining this behavior? Whether it's an argument with a spouse that goes on and on and on, or continuously piling on more and more weight, how am I exquisitely maintaining it?
Which is probably a useful question for anybody dealing with weight management clients to ask their clients.
Yeah, for sure. And then, of course, back to what's next. What's next puts them back at cause and makes them realize, in fact, every therapist, every social worker, every counselor should be saying that at the end of every session. What's next? Well, I'm going to go and, make up with my son who I haven't talked to in years. Whatever it is, put them back at cause and actively pursuing the goal.
That is beautiful. Okay, let's move on. We got a question sent in to us through our SpeakPipe page, and if you want to send us, just mention this, if you want us to actually play your questions live as we record them here, if you want
us it's okay.
If you want us to play your questions, send them to us in audio format, and the way to do that is go to speakpipe.com/hypnosis, or you can go to MikeMandelHypnosis.com, and you should see a little tab at the right-hand side that says send us a message. If you send us your question and it's clear, done through a good don't do it in in the windy weather over your iPhone or something, because we won't hear it clearly. But if you do it from a nice environment where we'll get a good sound from you, we will be happy to play your question on the podcast. Anyway, that said, Julius sent us in a question from SpeakPipe. I don't have his permission to play it, and the sound quality was not exceptional, but I want to restate the question and have you answer it, Mike. He asked, is hypnosis real? I want to learn street inductions, fast inductions. My guess here is he's been watching YouTube videos where someone walks up to another person, kind of yanks on their arm and yells, sleep! And they become this robotic follower of every command at that point.
Right.
And there's a lot of stuff that's missing, obviously.
Yes, and there's little elves showing up in a few minutes, and they're bringing me a brand new iPhone. No, the reality is, of course, street hypnosis can be done. We did it at Dundas Square last year in Toronto, which is Toronto's Times Square, working with people we just met, trancing them out, making them forget their names, ride roller coasters, all kinds of things. It is real. But not everything you see on YouTube is real. I mean, there's a lot of wild and woolly things happen where you do not see all the pre-frame, the work that's gone on in advance to prepare people for it. And so you really do have to prep a subject. You can't just walk up to someone and yell sleep and yank their arm because they'll probably punch you in the head or something. You have to clear some space first and get some momentum moving in that direction.
That makes a lot of sense. So if you want to learn rapid inductions or instant inductions, and there is a difference, then I suggest you join the Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy.
We do teach them.
You will learn, oh man, it's just, by the time you get to, I think it's lesson 6, you're learning some incredibly powerful methods of doing hypnosis on the street. Or just impromptu hypnosis. We don't like to call it street hypnosis, but just impromptu hypnosis. And you'll really understand the principles. The people who have joined the Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy so far have been writing to us saying, wow, these lessons are just so incredible. They're just so clearly laid out. They're entertaining and they're in bite-sized chunks. And people who have been studying hypnosis for a long time have written in saying this. And people who are absolute new beginners, I guess that's a redundant comment, isn't it? New beginners. They have written in just as much, saying how much they've loved it. So that's MikeMandelHypnosis.com/academy if you're interested in joining and can't make it to Toronto.
And we will accommodate you.
Yeah, so let's see what else we got on our list here. John Grinder's method of learning through saturation. That was a note that we wrote down. Let's talk about that, Mike.
Oh, well, yeah. A few years ago, I was messing around with my Stratocaster and practicing some blues scales. And I really applied something Grinder taught me, which is saturation. And whereas I was playing the scales over and over and learning some different licks and that on the guitar, what really made it click was when I saturated my brain with the blues scales constantly. And I would, in the background in my house, for days on end, have B.B. King and Eric Clapton and Stevie Ray Vaughan and Rory Gallagher and all these blues greats just playing. Different songs, a random mix, and I wasn't listening to it. It was purely unconscious. The idea was I was getting saturation. Mm-hmm. Then I built in the physicality by playing the scales with my left hand, over and over and over again, so that I had the hand strength to physically do what was necessary, bending the strings and so on. But when you put the two together, then when I sat down and played, all of a sudden the saturation kicked in, and I was producing all these amazing guitar licks that these other guys had played, even though I hadn't consciously learned them. And John said that saturation is the key. You have to build in the physicality, you have to build in the practice, but saturation is what makes the difference. So anything you have to learn, right now I'm prepping for our future next handwriting course, and I'm doing it by saturation, meaning I'm reading books on graphology over and over and over, multiple books, highlighting way, way over the top, beyond anything I could consciously remember. And the saturation will ensure the information gets in. So to make your hypnosis work better, saturate yourself with it. Watch programs on hypnosis, watch DVDs on it, read books on it. Cover every conceivable angle, even though you won't remember it all consciously.
Listen to podcasts on it, like this one.
That's right.
We've got
Chris and Jeff show.
Yeah, this is now episode 40, so there are a lot of podcasts.
Over 20 hours.
I mean, that's a lot of content coming from who I believe is the best hypnosis trainer on the planet here, Dr. Jeff.
Dr. Jeff.
Dr. Jeff.
Or just Jeff.
Yeah, that's funnier, isn't it?
I think it is, yeah.
So saturate. Now, if you're interested in more than just hypnosis, I mean, I think most of the audience listening here, they're very fascinated and curious about hypnosis, but most of us, meaning you, listeners, aren't going to use hypnosis for a career. And some of you, most of you, are in many cases just interested in learning how to be better communicators, better presenters, better speakers. And the same thing applies here, doesn't it? Listening to the podcast that we're using here, for example, and the power language that Mike's teaching you and all these different
and the NLP
techniques.
Stuff, which apparently doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, no, it's not that it doesn't work. It's that it doesn't exist.
Let's spend a few minutes on this.
Let's talk about that, Chris. You go ahead.
Oh, man. Okay, so we have talked about this already, but let's refine it a little bit. There was a post, I can't even remember where it was, and I don't even want to give the guy credit for it, really, because it's so just boggles the mind how crap science this is. The problem that I see with anything to do with hypnosis or NLP, or let's just even say persuasion tools or influence, whatever it is, or getting into peak state, these are artistic things. We're not claiming, nobody has ever claimed that these are scientific things. in terms of how they're applied. There is science to explain how it works, obviously, but you don't ingest hypnosis or NLP like you would, take Tylenol or Advil if you had a headache. You have to apply it by doing all kinds of things, calibrating, understanding the needs of the person, matching their model of the world, building rapport, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right, and then somebody has apparently claimed that, he's proven that NLP doesn't work or doesn't exist or whatever. Yeah. It's a communication model.
And what part of NLP? What exactly was tested?
Was he testing anchoring? Was he testing the meta model? How was he testing it? The whole idea is that I've heard people say the eye accessing patterns don't work. Well, that's really unusual because I've found since 1993 that they're completely consistent, and I get amazing results with them
once you calibrate
all the time.
The person.
Once you calibrate the person. So it's how do people seem to get a bee in their bonnet about this stuff? No, this doesn't exist. And this, I've heard people, the argument against homeopathy. We tested 10 people who had flu and it didn't work. Well, they don't understand how homeopathy works. You don't throw influenzium 30C at every single person. You have to calibrate their entire symptomology. Do they feel like there's a tight band around their head causing a headache? Yes. Well, if that's the case, then you give them gelsemium for flu. I mean, it's different. If their eyes are bright and their pupils are dilated and their face is red, then you're going to give them belladonna for flu. You can't give one thing to everybody. You have to deal with people like individuals. And to take something like NLP and make a blanket statement like, it doesn't work or doesn't exist, it shows the ignorance of the tester more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, so maybe let's say somebody is listening to this podcast and they enter into a discussion with someone else who's read such a study that NLP doesn't work. What are some good questions that people can then use, which are NLP type questions,
use the
to
meta
throw
model
back at them,
right,
and actually demonstrate
which aspects of the study do you agree with? Well, all of them. Specifically, which ones?
Yeah.
What part of NLP did they test? Well, I don't know. So there are areas about the study you don't know anything about. Yes, and yet you formulated this, and yet
So you just use the meta model.
This is a real question here, Chris, that there's people listening right now who don't even know what NLP is, and they're struggling and treading water, trying to keep their head above water just to make sense of what we're even talking about, even though my voice is going. And my question to you is, what are you prepared to do to make their lives more enriched with the meta model now?
Well, what I'm prepared to do is suggest that they listen to podcast number 39 so they have a full understanding of that language pattern that you just used, because it was so much fun.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, the meta model is one aspect of NLP. And just think about it logically. By asking good questions, you elicit better information. Does it make sense that works? Of course it does.
But the irritating thing is, or they'll reframe it and say, well, this is cognitive psychology. Well, the elements that are like cognitive psychology, they have no problem with.
Sure, call them whatever the hell you want.
I don't care what you call it. My point is, I want people to feel better.
Yeah.
I want people to have better lives. That's my concern with all of this.
Because honestly, we couldn't give a crap if we called it NLP or something else.
Right.
It's just that
irrelevant
thing,
to
that stuff that we do that works.
Yeah, that stuff we do that works. And I really don't want to have to contact the hundreds of people I've worked with to get over phobias, anxieties, and relationship problems who have really good lives now and tell them, guess what? Some academic sitting on his ivory throne has determined that this doesn't work. Therefore, you're still busted and broken and you probably need to be on drugs.
Well, you just have to call them and say that you didn't actually use NLP, Mike. You just used that fixing thing that works.
Well, there is that.
So, we'll just call it something else. Whatever. It doesn't work. Supposedly doesn't work.
Now, you'd asked me about this Mr. Floyd thing.
Yes,
I wanted to touch on this because we talk about bending reality and warping reality, and I've done that many, many years. And as Chris will know, I'm just going to move the microphone a bit closer here for my voice's sake. As Chris will know and testify, the Swissangi story is an example of just messing with people's heads from a very early age. Well, I continued it. When I was a little kid, a girl named Lynn up at Lake Simcoe, when there's about 4 kids hanging around. I don't even know whose house it was. She was like a year or 2 older than us. We all created this game called Mrs. Floyd. And she was Mrs. Floyd and scared the crap out of us with this game. Well, I hadn't seen her since I was like 8 or 7 or something. So I kept the game going for the last 53 years. And I played it with my sister's kids when they were little kids. Now they're married and are in relationships with kids of their own. And I played it with all manner of kids. And the problem is Mr. Floyd is too superbly designed to be a scary game. It's too good. And it became so frightening, I've had to stop playing it. And the reason why is, I'm going to demonstrate this, Chris, is the difference between 2 movies that are both the same story. One is the original story, the movie called The Haunting. And it's from the book of the same name by Shirley Jackson. The Haunting of Hill House was actually the book. It became the movie The Haunting. I think it came out in about 1963. It's a black and white film with Claire Bloom and a few other actors in it, and Russ Tamblyn. It was remade in probably the 1990s, and the first version in black and white is about 1 billion times more terrifying than the remade one with all the special effects. Now, why do you think that is?
Oh, why do I think a black and white film might be more scary?
Why do you think this particular one is? What the mistake was they made in the new one? Any idea?
No, I haven't seen either, but my initial gut when you said black and white versus special effects, I think that black and white sort of leave a lot of information out, and you have to...
You're on the right track.
You have to fill in the blanks.
You're so on the right track. See, special effects, they made all these visual things that were really scary. But the original film, The Haunting, which I recommend all of you rent, you see nothing.
So you have to imagine
it's all in your imagination. And the human mind has far more terror. Right. You're right. You're absolutely right. Okay, high five. Yeah. Far more amazing special effects than anything you can produce in a studio. And it is all implied and inferred and is way scarier. So I designed this Mr. Floyd game along those lines. Now, the idea is I'm Mr. Floyd, the friendly old retired school teacher who sits outside his house whittling, and the kids come by on their way to school. And as they come by, they say hi to Mr. Floyd, and then they say hi on their way home again. But when they're way home, they always ask him the question, is it going to be a good night or a bad night?
Oh!
Now, most of the time, Mr. Floyd says, it's going to be a good night. And the kids relax and they're happy, and they go home, and then they come back the next day, and we play again. Of course, it's all in one day. Multiple days. So when they come back, if it's a bad night, here's the problem. The genius of the game is Mr. Floyd is the only one who can protect them from this upcoming horror. But he is also the one who's trying to kill them. So it's this ambiguity that the kids find so terrifying. So they would come back to me and I'd say, it's going to be a very bad night. And they go, oh no. And Mr. Floyd immediately starts a countdown. They've got like 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And he's going to, which of course I just make up the time.
Yeah.
They have to fulfill this ritual, otherwise I become evil Mr. Floyd and kill them. So the problem, they're rushing around. Oh, I need 3 twigs the same size and a reddish-colored stone and a picture of a cat. And these kids are like, wah, running in 100 directions in the cottage. And they come back, and if they're not back in time, just as they're getting to me, I'm turning into evil Mr. Floyd.
We have to talk about the restaurant.
We're going there. We're going to play it today. So they're running back to evil Mr. Floyd. The agent of their destruction is the only one who can help them. Well, the problem is we played it at my cottage this summer, and it was too scary.
Did it go horribly wrong?
It went horribly wrong, and I felt bad about it because I like kids. I don't want to scare them. The thing is, I terrified a couple of kids without even playing the game. They said, okay, I don't want to play. It's too scary. And then they started asking me and said, well, what would it be? And I started describing the game.
Yeah.
And one of the kids, Jordan, she said, are there other people in it? And I said, yes, there's 2 other people. One you know and one you've never met. And they're just like freaked out like this. And they said, well,
it's the way you say it, make eye contact.
That's right. They said, well, where are they? I said, well, one's in the boat under the tarpaulin and the other's in the woods watching.
Oh.
And they got way too freaked out. Heather said to me, Mike, you idiot. She said, you're a freaking hypnotist. Stop messing with these kids' heads. And I had to go and apologize to them. And we never even played the game. Discussing it was enough. And I'd look over their shoulder at the woods and just sort of quietly nod like this. And they're like, what? Spinning around. I mean, this is in broad daylight.
It's the congruence of all this, right? And actually, this just makes me think of when we were having lunch with my wife and she was asking something about, you were telling a story about your dad, how your dad used to psychologically keep you in line by telling you about
he was the master of psychological torture.
And so, without going into the story, my wife asked Mike, does that mean that if you don't raise your voice, it works better? And what was your answer to that?
Oh, absolutely. He never raised his voice once, but he kept me under complete control.
Yeah, so instead of yelling, if you're just calm, and you just state things as they are.
And the implication is far more terrifying.
It sounds much... Yeah, I mean, if you think about any scary character in a movie you've ever seen, they don't say they're yelling at you. They just talk like this.
They're Hannibal Lecter,
and,
you know? Yeah. Dexter. We're back to Dexter. You know what? My friend James B. is an online guy on Jazz FM radio, and you can listen to it worldwide. Jazz FM out of Toronto, 91.1. Great jazz station. And he's an online guy, on-air guy in the morning, and just a wonderful, wonderful friend. And he showed me a thing that was really scary. He had 2 music boxes. And he says, listen, nice, right? Turns one on. Ding, 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 ding. And he just turns it off. Turns the other one on. It's ding, 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 whatever the tune was, turns it off. Says, sounds nice, doesn't it? I said, yeah. Turns them both on at once. Suddenly, scary. Two music boxes, different tunes over each other. Yeah. Horrifying. Firing all these anchors from scary movies.
That's bizarre. Oh, that is really bizarre. Okay, do you want to talk about the laughing game?
The laughing game is fantastic. I recommend you do this. The laughing game is you get a bunch of people together. Get at least 4 people. You can do it with as few as 2. The more, the funnier it is. You get about 10 people for an evening out. It's hilarious. Each person puts in a sum of money. Let's say $10 for an evening's entertainment. Someone begins timing it. They set an alarm on their iTunes that's going to go off 2 hours later.
You said iTunes.
iPhone. So start again until I'm sick, can't you? Set an alarm on their iPhone to go off in 2-3 hours, whatever. Until that alarm goes off, you're allowed to laugh, joke, whatever you want. But if you laugh, you have to laugh like an insane lunatic like this. So, if you do not do that, your name is stricken from the list, and everybody else keeps doing it until there's one person left. When the alarm goes off, whoever is still left splits the money. And sometimes this one person gets like $100. So there's an incentive to stay with it. It's a lot of fun. Well, you can be laughing in a regular manner, and as long as you catch yourself in that laugh and change it. Mike Smith and I used to sit after class, and he'd be in a restaurant ordering food, and we'd put $5 in each, which is back then in those days, in 1973, you could buy a car for $5 and a house. But he's sitting across the table, and he starts to order. He says, I'll have a coffee, and he just sees me trying to catch his eye, and he starts laughing. And the waitress is standing there, and he says, I'll have a coffee, and and she looks at him like he's insane, which makes me laugh, so I know, and we're both going, It's so funny because it gets worse and worse and funnier, and you got a whole table laughing like mad scientists. It's brilliant.
And of course, you're sitting there at the table, and like there's 2 people out of 10 left, and so the other 8 are trying to make everybody else laugh. And isn't the real issue they start throwing it And isn't the real issue here that there are some people who don't have the luxury of the time to be out at bars having fun? And
the real question is, what am I prepared to do about it?
Yeah. So, of course, you get them laughing hysterically. So, lots of fun. All right, a lot of silliness, but a couple of good answers to some real hypnosis questions.
I think we had an empowering question I'd written down for this, Chris.
Let's do the empowering question.
You should deliver the empowering question today. Yeah. I want to hear you do it glannatively. So listen up, guys, and let this resonate with you. These are meant to do something for you.
This isn't the one that we came up with on the webinar, but I'll ask this one anyway. What is the most emotionally powerful memory from your childhood? And what does it teach you about how to have a better life now? What's the most emotionally powerful memory from your childhood? And what does it teach you about how to have a better life now?
Nicely done, Chris.
You got a closing metaphor for us, Mike?
I do. A number of years ago, across the skies of Saskatchewan, there was an immense roaring sound. Farmers came out of the small towns, came out in their fields, and looked upward. And 3 huge shapes were soaring across the sky in the gathering sundown, gathering darkness, making a roaring sound beyond belief. They moved across the sky faster than any vehicle on Earth could. And the men watched these 3 things fly over their fields in a perfect formation, moving east until they were gone over the horizon. Someone thought they were meteors, but meteors didn't go horizontally. They fell to the ground. They didn't fly in formation. And a couple of hours later, they were reported over New England in the United States. Hundreds of people saw them, maybe thousands, and the 3 shapes then turned sharply and flew in formation, roaring with sound, down the New England seaboard, and were spotted over Brazil. And a couple of hours later, having been seen by thousands of people, they turned left and made a sharp turn in unison over the Atlantic Ocean towards the coast of Africa, and were not seen again. And it would be so easy to discount them as aircraft. But this was before World War I, before even the simple World War I biplanes had taken to the sky.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. This has been Brain Software with Dr. Mike Mandel, session number 40, otherwise known as The Chris and Jeff Show. You are our fellow hypnotic storm riders, and we want to make sure that you're entertained and educated on these awesome podcasts. So send us in your questions. You can hit us up on our website. You can also use our SpeakPipe page, speakpipe.com/hypnosis. Most important thing, though, is I want you to share your opinion on this podcast with other readers. So head on over to iTunes.
And listeners.
Listeners, yeah, not readers. Head on over to iTunes or head on over to our website, and you'll find a link to this show in iTunes, and write a review. We would love to get your, hopefully, 5-star review on this podcast.
Did I ever tell you, Chris, the adventure of the the Austro-Hungarian ambassador? You ever hear that one?
I don't think I have.
It was 1916, so the war was just entering its third year. And the Royal Fusiliers needed a bit of a break, and a number of us were taken out into the country to a wonderful estate owned by Lord Melbury. His wife was very highly placed because her father worked in Whitehall for the War Room. Anyway, we were all there, and there were people from all different embassies, and a lot of men who were interested in the war continuing. The DuPonts were there, and the Rothschilds who were financing the war, and the Austro-Hungarian ambassador was there, and of course, Peter Fitzwadsworth Smythe, and Ray Houston, Guy Billingham, and Dennis Bryce Morgan was there, and Henry Squatter and I. And we were all hanging about wondering why the damn war kept going and going and going. And I think it was Peter Fitzwadsworth Smythe, the old colonel, said, I just wish somebody could do something about it. Lady Melbury's highly connected. Her father's just very high up in the government. And we were talking about this, and just then Lady Melbury walked through, lovely woman, about 30-ish, although she looked about 20, very voluptuous figure in a long gown, low cut. And they said, oh, she's very well connected. And I said, I am sure she is. Funniest damn thing. Well, just then the Austro-Hungarian ambassador came over. He had Bryce Morgan with him, and he was holding an envelope in his hand. He said, Bryce Morgan says this man doesn't speak English, but I want you to know I've been speaking with him. And Morgan turned and said a few words. We realized he was speaking Hungarian. Unbelievable the things this chap could do. Cleverest fellow. He said, look, this man from the Austro-Hungarian embassy said that the war can be over in a fortnight, 2 weeks. He's got a piece of paper here that's been signed by the French embassy. We're going to get this letter from the Frenchman, and we're going to shut this war down, provided we can get it secretly to the War Department, if there's any way of doing it. The problem is Lady Melbury's connected, but if any of the DuPonts or Rothschilds see us walking over, they'll catch on what's happening. And Squatter says, well, I could take it over. They don't know me, which, of course, was the entire point. They said, all right, now listen, she's gone upstairs. Go over to her husband and use the secret code word English sausage and get this letter in her hands. So Squatter, being rather naive, walks over and he says, with this envelope, and he says to Lord Melbury, gives him a wink, and he said, I've got an English sausage for your wife. He said, what? He said, I've got an English sausage I want to give to your wife. He said, how dare you, sir? And he held up the envelope. He said, it's all right, I have a French letter. Now, Squatter didn't realize a French letter was slang for a prophylactic. And he held this envelope up. Lord Melbury struck him across the face. He said, how dare you, sir? He said, talking about my wife, he said, no, I've got an actual French letter. So the guards came over and they tore this envelope open. Well, Bryce Morgan has switched the envelopes. And there was a prophylactic in it. Oh, they dragged Squatter out. They were interrogating him. The funniest thing is, Bryce Morgan slipped upstairs in all the commotion, and he gave Lady Melbury a damn good seeing to. And the funniest thing, he swapped the letters. The war could have been over. It went on for another 2 years. Nearly 1.5 million men murdered over that. The funniest thing, isn't it? What a chap. All that just for a bit of crumpet.
Where did you come up with this?